Friends, good morning. Good morning, Lou.
Good morning. How are we doing today?
Good. This is a holiday week here in the United States. Thanksgiving is day after tomorrow. So everybody's sort of winding down tomorrow, taking a half day off. Are you off tomorrow, Lou, or a half
Uh,
day?
I'm on, but a little bit less than usual. Some people had to move around to today, as we discussed about.
Yeah. So it's a nice, crisp fall day.
Oh, yeah. Very
Beautiful
crisp.
here.
If you want to use the word crisp, go right ahead. Cool.
So we are now on chapter 17. We are going to be trying an ambitious wish on my part to do verses 5 through 10. And these are important verses, so I don't want to rush too much into them. But you remember in our last episode, which was episode 185, we got up to verse 5. And the next 5 verses are mind boggling. You need to really look at them because what it's teaching us is how to calm your mind.
Oh,
This is an important area for us to focus on because you should recognize how noisy your mind is. The only time your mind stops working or talking to you, having thoughts, is during deep sleep. Can you imagine? The rest of the time, it's working nonstop. And if you have any kind of a machine, if it's going all the time, it sort of wears out, right? I tend to, every time I see something working nonstop, I say, let's give the motor a chance to rest, and I turn it off for a few minutes, and then, or a day, and then I turn it back on again. I can give you examples. I don't know if it's necessary or not. I sometimes wonder about these airplanes that go, from New York to Bombay,
right.
turn
Yeah.
around and just come right back. They don't rest. I'm assuming that there's time when the machines are completely shut off and overhauled completely. But the mind never gets that chance other than during deep sleep, during REM, during regular waking state, during dream states. It's always working. And our ancestors, the sages, realized that we must, in order to try to get to the Brahman, the Atman within us, we need to be able to block out all of this noise that the mind makes. So, what it's telling us through these next few verses is the way in which you can get there, how to do that. And what these next few verses are talking about, the first thing is tapas. So, tapas means austerity. When I used to use the word austerity or think of austere, used to think of somebody who's dressed in very minimalistic clothing, uh, saffron colored robes, no nothing that belongs to him. He's just sitting up in the mountain somewhere. What austere really means in the scriptures is somebody who sparingly uses all his assets, his mind, his intellect, his words, his mouth, his ability to speak, his body. Everything is conserved without using it up. If you conserve all that energy, just think to yourself how much more energetic you would feel. You have the energy, but you're wasting it. Have you ever run across somebody who can't stop talking?
Yes. Yes. Never
That was,
stops them. Yeah. They're just always, and they're caught up, but they confront everything in the world. Everything they see in front of them, they have to have a comment about, they have to have a thought about, they have to have a fight with, it seems. Yeah, I know those people.
that was a very quick response on your part.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, it is exhausting to listen to them. So you can just imagine what it is like for them if their mind is just working all the time. Now, when we get to the point where we're talking about silence, because it'll talk to you about how to be mom, M-A-U-M, mom. Mom means quiet. Now, there are people in India who fast. They fast for not eating food. They fast not eating, drinking water, uh, and they fast with not sleeping. They fast with not speaking. So those people who observe the fast of not speaking sometimes will sit quietly and for like weeks or years on end.
Wow.
But they'll write things, and they'll, with their fingers, they will point to it, and they'll communicate other ways. That defeats the purpose. What the scripture says, the tongue, the mouth, the vocal cords is an organ of action, as you know. It's just like your arms and your feet. The vocal cords is an organ of action, and it says you must give your organ of action silence. Why? Not because your organ of action is going to be used up, but because they say the mind is using these things to get out this communication. That if you keep the voice box silent, it is hoping that you can keep your mind silent. So the whole ultimate purpose of all of this is to keep your mind quiet. So this next verse, which is verse 5 and 6, they're usually read together, is basically talking about tapas, which is austerity, austerity for the mind, for the intellect, for the body, for the voice box, all austere, so that you can conserve the strength and use it towards one single pointed goal. Can you imagine how much strength that produces? And the scriptures say use that single pointed focus towards getting to be one with God, with Brahman, with Atman, with your Lord. But if you were to be that conservative, using all that strength, just imagine that if you focus it on a business decision or some intellectual thing, how much more powerful your mind would be. So verse 5, those people who practice terrible austerity, not enjoined by the scriptures, with much hypocrisy and egoism, possessed by the power of lust and attachment, torturing the elements in the body, and even me, Brahman, Atman, torturing even me, embodied within, senseless, know them to be of demonic resolves. Bottom line is, what he's saying is that this is a tamasic tapas. This is a tapas that is of tamasic quality, because both verse 5 and 6 talk about this. They are austere, but not according to the scriptures. They're not enjoined by the scriptures. They're filled with lust, they're filled with attachment, they're filled with hypocrisy, and they're filled with egoism. These are tamasic people. They senselessly torture themselves. The demonic people, the tamasic people, torture themselves for what? Because they have a desire for what they don't have, right? They want to get something and they want to acquire something, and they have an attachment to what they do have. They have a huge ego. They live a hypocritical life. Everything is hypocrisy. Their effort is in the wrong direction and with wrong decisions. Real tapas, as we know, has the sanction of the scriptures. What does the scripture say? That it is your goal to practice this austerity with pleasure, with wanting to do it without wanting anything for yourself. Those who don't, the tamasic people, lead a senseless life. They do not observe what the scriptures teach them. There's no purpose in their life. They torture themselves by their perceptions and their actions, which is the body. They torture themselves with the feelings and emotions, which is the mind, and with their thoughts and ideas, which is the intellect. Now, if you notice that in the last part of this verse, what does he say? That even me, embodied with him, they torture, right? Now, that doesn't make sense in a way, because we know that the Atman, the self, Brahman, is immaculate, the subtlest of all. Nothing can disturb the Atman, leave alone torture it. It only means that the self, or the Atman, is hidden within each one of us. Hidden because you can't see it. It's obscured. Behind all these gross practices and desires and lust. So when he says torture, means that these people, because of their desire and lust, are hiding the Atman even more. It's getting buried further down. And what the Atman wants to do is for the Atman to be found and to be one with us. And that's what the scriptures enjoin us to do. Verse 6, in order to pursue their goals of desires, these non-thinking people, torture even their bodies and their minds and their senses. So what drives these people? What drives them is their lust, their desire, their wanting to gain wealth, acquisition, and power and violence. These people are very attracted to power and violence also. In the process, they may hurt themselves, but they'll also hurt other people. They focus on what they're doing to other people, but they're hurting themselves. Such people disregard the Lord seated in the heart, within. Disrespect the Lord by disregarding the scriptures. These are tamasic people. They will hurt themselves in order to hurt others. One of the saints, who was a poet in Maharashtra, in India, used the poem of hailstones. He says, when hailstones come down, they destroy the crop, but they also destroy themselves while they're destroying the crop.
Yeah.
Another example is that of lawsuits. You know, the biggest lawsuits are those that are between husband and wife during divorce, or between a father and children within families,
Right.
brothers, close friends, etc. And so in doing so, the only people who benefit are the attorneys. But you're saying, I'm going to get him. I will get him. I will not let him go. You're hurting yourself too at the same time. So people who do this, you know, who are tamasic, they create these laws and rules of hurting others for their benefit. And we were talking before about Thanksgiving. You know, how many millions of turkeys are killed because somebody made it a rule that Thanksgiving time you should have culturally a turkey that is killed and on the table to be eaten. Similarly, in India, there were rules of that came way after the Gita and the Upanishads, that animals should be slaughtered. That's all gone now. But these are not scriptural prescriptions. You know, killing an animal, killing anything. So people who do this or make these up are very tamasic in that respect. So we have to transform our convictions, whatever we're convinced about, our convictions. Instead of going towards desires, wealth, power, violence, acquisitions, we change them from within. You must appreciate higher values in others, because if you start focusing on the higher values that others show you, then whatever you revere is what you will become like. So focus on what you revere, which is good, that you know is good. Focus on that, and you will find yourself leaning towards that and becoming like that. Verse 7. Now what he talks about is sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic qualities of food. You would be so surprised. The scriptures are so detailed about what is good for you, what makes you a good person, what makes you a sattvic person, what calms your mind in terms of food and for others. It's very fascinating. So, verily the food is dear to all of us. It is threefold, as is austerity, which is tapas, sacrifice, which is yajna, and gift or charity, which is dana. Do hear this, their distinctions. So from verse 8 to verse 22, towards the end of this chapter, Krishna describes the sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic qualities of food, sacrifice, which is yajna, austerity, tapas, and gift or dana. Krishna brings in the other person's qualities and able to demonstrate whether the person is sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Whatever the quality of the shraddha is, you remember we talked at length about shraddha, which is loosely in English translated as faith. Whatever the quality of that shraddha is, it is maintained in distinct ways. So here he talks about ahar. He doesn't say food. He says ahar. A-H-A-R-A, ahar. Ahar means intake, not necessarily food. See, we misunderstand ahar as food, but I'll talk about this more in detail when we talk about ahar itself. His sacrifice, which is yajna, and again, the sacrifice is not of animals, not of other things, but of his own ego, his own personification. His austerity, which is tapas, sacrifice of his desire to gain more for himself, and his gifts. He's going to talk about sattvic donations, charity versus rajasic charity versus tamasic charity. Each are classified as sattvic, rajasic, or tamasic. Now, we classify food as protein, carbohydrate, and fat. It would be better for us to start thinking in terms of sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic food. So there are four types that he talks about in the next few verses. One is ahar, or food loosely, sacrifice, yajna, tapas, austerity, and charity. Ahar means whatever we take in through our skin, through our eyes, through our ears, through our nose, through our tongue, through our mind, and through our intellect. We imbibe ideas, thoughts, sensations, constant input from the moment you wake up, and even while you're asleep, you're intaking things, except when you're in deep sleep. That is the only time you don't imbibe anything. Even in your dreams, even in your REM sleep, you are imbibing. You know what's going on around you. Many of you who are listening to this podcast right now, if you're driving, at the same time as you're listening and you're imbibing, you're taking in, you're looking at everything else that's going on around you. You're looking at the car next to you, you're looking at the car in front, you glance at the rear view mirror, you are taking in all of that. If there's somebody else in the car talking, gesturing, you're taking in all of that. And believe it or not, it makes an impact on you. Lou, you remember when we first started doing podcasts, we started talking about memoirs of a psychiatrist that had nothing to do with the Gita, and we were talking about hypnosis?
Yes. And how you take in so much more than you realize you do.
That's
because
right.
you only focus on a small percentage of it, but your mind takes it all in.
Right. So what Lou and I did at that time, we talked about when I was in my early 20s and I'd first come to the United States, there were some crimes that we did this podcast on. And the first one was, it taught me a lesson. The guy says, I just glanced at the license plate number. And that was weeks ago. I don't remember it. Would you remember it? Think about it.
No.
A number plate that you just looked at. But under hypnosis, many times after that for crimes, I was able to hypnotize a person and he was able to give some minute details. If you listen to that podcast, you'll find out. So what that means is that even a slight glance at a license plate number, something that is totally unimportant, it is stored in your mind. So can you imagine what you're doing when you're focusing on a TV screen? And that is much more interesting than a license plate number, or you're listening to somebody, or you're reading something. All of that is hard drives carved into your brain, not just for this life, but also for the next, because it remains in there. So because of that, the Gita says, when you get to do satsang, which is, getting together with other people, like-minded people, all of the good qualities, good talk, good verses stays in your mind. You should try and be not with dussang, which is people who are not good for you. There, it gets carved in your mind forever. I think I've given this example a few times in the past when ISIS or Taliban first came at that time, they were beheading people and putting it on YouTube. And some physicians had come to me after that to say, can you please hypnotize me to block this out? I saw it. I never looked at it because I knew I didn't want to put that in my mind. But those who looked at that beheading, they say, I can't think of anything else. It's carved into my mind. I can't get it out of my mind. Can you help me? So you don't want to put anything in your mind, just like I didn't want to look at those beheadings, or I don't want to look at violence. I don't want to look at these kinds of things. You should try and keep all that out of your mind. Make your mind sattvic in what it takes in. So that's about ahar. We'll talk about food also, but all other aspects, what you read, what you watch on TV. Next is yajna, which is worship of the divine, sacrificing your own self, like puja, like a prayer, sacrificing your ego when you're doing something for a corporation, company, or others. Offer everything to the Lord. Don't think about what's in it for me. And tapas means conserving the power of your mind, your intellect, your senses, your body. Be single pointed in your focus of your energies towards your Lord, towards God. And dana is charity or donation or gift. If you do sattvic ahar, sattvic yajna, sattvic tapas, sattvic dan, you're almost guaranteed to be self-realized. So now let's go to food. Verse 8. Those who are sattvic like this type of ahar, that's what he says, they like this type of ahar. All food had life at some point, right? You don't eat stones. Stones never had life, so you don't eat them. Anything that you're eating was alive very recently, like a vegetable that you pick up and had life in it, or some time ago, but all had life at some time or the other. You don't eat things that never had life. Sattvic food increases the lifespan by rejuvenating different parts of your system. This is a starter. No specific foods are mentioned in the Gita or the Upanishads. So this is so brilliant. The Gita was written 3101 BCE, 3101 years before Christ, before the Common Era. And Upanishads were written many thousands of years before that. They were so bright. They knew that foods would be different in 21 and the 21st century, 20th century than they were at that time. So they didn't say don't eat processed food. They didn't say don't eat fried food, frozen foods. They just gave you the general gist of what you should eat. And Ayurveda, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but when I went to an ashram and I was staying there, there was an Ayurvedic cottage where this British lady who had studied Ayurveda her whole life and now was a Vedantin, met with me and told me what to eat and what not to eat. And during the time that I was up there in the ashram, and then subsequently when I came back to my house, I followed what she was saying. I felt like a different person. And it's not easy because I have a Rajasic personality, and my Rajasic personality demands, as we will see, certain types of foods, sour foods, spicy foods, and so on. And so I could not maintain the kind of diet that she prescribed for me. But these are the diets that are prescribed in the Gita and in the Upanishads. So no different difficult specific types of food are mentioned in the Gita for what you should eat. But it says Sattvic people prefer Sattvic food. It sounds like they're saying Sattvic food begets Sattvic people. No, it's like a seed, right?
Yeah.
You put it in a soil and a plant comes out of it. But the plant that comes is because of what DNA, RNA is in the seed, not because of the soil. But without the soil, that plant will not come through the seed. Right. Similarly, you have to be a Sattvic individual, and the Sattvic food will promote the Sattvic qualities within you. The Sattvic food, if you're a Rajasic person, will not make you Sattvic. You have to be red, but it will promote the Sattvic qualities that you're trying to inculcate. The next thing is food value, which is purity of food. He says, food that is useful to your body. Has to have some substance to it, not substance-less food. There are many kinds of fast foods or junk foods that have no substance to it. He says that is not Sattvic food. Then that which gives you bala, B-A-L-A, or strength, that which makes you strong, that which gives you arogya or health, should make you healthy. Sukha, food that makes you happy. And I should eat that food with happiness. It makes you happy. You should eat it with happiness. Accept the food with happiness. Have a smile on your face, not anger. So foods which increase your longevity, purity, strength, health, joy, and cheer, which are savory, which have some taste to it, which are oleaginous, which are oil producing. So nuts are oil producing. You have to have a little bit of oil, is what he's saying, in that food, because of number of reasons why it can be absorbed, and so on, to the sattvic. These are dear to the sattvic. So 8, 9, and 10 verses talk about the different sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic kinds of foods. When he says dear to the sattvic, he means the food is agreeable. It is liked by a sattvic person. It's pleasant. It's preferred. Carnivorous animals, for instance, prefer meat, right? They eat meat. And because of that, they're vicious. So this is the importance of food on us. Carnivorous animals, if you give them vegetables, most species won't eat it. Some eat both. But most carnivorous animals will not eat vegetarian food. Because of that, these carnivores are ferocious, untamed, and uncontrolled. Herbivores, on the other hand, like cows and sheep and lambs, are tame. They're easier to be controlled. Therefore, vegetarian food is more conducive to control the mind and be peaceful. Jains, Jains, is a sect. They're also Hindus, but they lean more towards Buddhism. Buddhisms are also an offshoot of Hinduism, but Jains specifically will not eat onions or garlic or ginger, anything that grows below the ground. Why? Because they say that that is mind altering. Anything that grows below the ground is obnoxious, not just in taste, but obnoxious to the mind, and produces unrest and agitation within the mind. You've all seen Sikhs, those people that wear a turban on their head. When their first guru came about, he said, we have to fight for our country. We're Hindus, but we have to fight. And so he said, we have to form a new religion that inculcates some things of other religions which are more violent. So he said, we are going to start eating meat. Until that time, they were vegetarians. He says, 5 things we will do. We'll grow our hair long so that we look ferocious. We'll never shave or cut a single hair on our body. So you notice that Sikhs have a long beard. They've never touched a blade to their face or their head. Their hair is long. They wear a turban. They have to wear a dagger by law, by their religious law, on their person at all times, a comb at all times. They have to wear underwear at all times. These are 5 different rules that the Sikhs have. But one thing that the guru told them is that you are allowed to eat meat. Now, the reason he said that is because it produces for him this ferocious ability to fight, as opposed to eating herbivorous food and being mild and docile. Now, you may find this hard to believe. I'll give you a personal example. When I was in medical school, I finished medical school when I was 22 or 23. Until that time, in my last few years, we had been taught to give injections. And I noticed that in India at that time, this is going back 50 years from now, at that time, everybody was asking for vitamin B complex injections. You hear anything like this, Lou, here in this country?
Vitamin D, yes.
Vitamin, no. B as in boy.
Oh, B. Oh, yes.
Vitamin B complex was very commonly asked for, especially people who are elderly said, give me a vitamin B complex injection. I'll feel so much better. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I used to have a line of my relatives at my house, all asking for vitamin B12, B complex injections. And I would give it to them and say, oh my goodness, I feel so much better. And once a month, they would line up asking for these injections. And it was commonly prescribed at that time. And I never understood why. So I came here, and now that I'm in my 70s, I occasionally feel some tiredness and lethargy and so on. And I say, maybe, I should take a vitamin B complex injection. Now, over here in the United States, it's not commonly given. One time, my wife, who's also a physician, had somebody come to our office to cover for her during the time that we were away, and he brought with him his own kit of vitamin B complex vials, and he was giving it to all the nurses in her office, and they all came back and said, oh my God, I was vacuuming. I normally go home and just collapse on the couch. And I took these vitamin B injections, doc, and I feel so much better, so much energetic. And I said, hey, that's what I used to do. I want one of those. So I went to him, and he had his special little collection of vitamin B complex, and he gave me an injection. The next day, my wife and I were on a treadmill in the gym next to each other. And she asked me, and I don't normally, I'm not a harsh person. I'm not, rude or sharp or hurt people's feelings. I don't like that. But she said something so innocuous, so mild, something that would not have raised even an eyebrow from me in the past. I just turned and snapped at her enough that she had tears in her eyes because she's not used to me talking like that.
Right.
And I was very disturbed by that reaction on my part. And I said, why did I do that? And I kept analyzing and thinking, what called for that reaction? Now, certainly not her comment. It was a very innocuous, mild comment. And I then realized that the vitamin B complex that I took the day before, you should know that vitamin B complex is so rare, and especially in India, so valuable because people are all vegetarians. And there's some parts of things that you need, your body needs, that are not available unless you eat vegetables in huge quantities and certain types of vegetables, but it's more easily available in animal substances. So the B complex comes from animal liver and other body parts. And when you take that, I at least experienced an increase in more ferocious qualities of myself. Enough said. I don't want to keep going on because we've got lots of other things to go. But the food that you eat and drink causes changes in your system. I mean, you should only ask my children when my grandchildren eat chocolate, what happens to them, or sugar, or seeing my children drink lots of coffee. You get wired. Alcohol, you see what happens with people that drink alcohol. So foods cause you to change from your sattvic nature. So keep that in mind, friends. Be careful what you put into your system. Now talk comes to rajasic food. Foods that are bitter, foods that are sour. And by the way, there's a word here in Sanskrit in front of each one of these that says ati, A-T-I, ati. So he's not talking of just all bitter foods or all sour foods or all salty foods. He's talking about extremely, ati means extreme, extremely bitter, extremely sour, extremely salty, very, very hot temperature-wise food, pungent, very pungent food, dry food, burning food, which produce pain, grief, and disease are relished by the rajasic person. These kinds of foods are relished. And I can tell you from my personal experience that I like very sour foods. I like very salty foods. I like extremely hot foods that burn other people's mouth as they're going. It's that hot. My tea, my coffee, etc. So rajasic foods are the preferred foods of rajasic people. So extremely bitter, sour, salty, very hot temperature-wise, pungent, like chilies for the tongue, or food that is offensive to the nose and the tongue. Lou, have you ever had wasabi?
Yes. I love wasabi.
Yeah, well, there's a rajasic part in you too then, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you who don't know what wasabi is, it's made of horseradish, and it's often eaten with Japanese food, and it is extremely pungent, and rajasic people like that. Dry, parched grains, dry fruits are also rajasic. Burning, temperature-wise, burning the tongue, stinging the tongue, causing your eyes, nose, and mouth to water. Rajasic food produces pain, negative effect, a hangover, grief, a sense of remorse after eating. For those people who come over to a rajasic person's house for lunch or dinner after eating the spicy food, they have a grief, a sense of remorse. Why did I eat this?
Yeah.
And disease, and unwholesome food causing things disease. When you say disease, food causes disease, Krishna means peptic ulcers, hyperacidity, that kind of disease, not cancer. So when I'd gone to that ashram, I had gone because my wife had found that she had hypertension, high blood pressure, and all kinds of medications were not helping. And we said, let's go to this ashram for a week. And 1 week, her blood pressure came down back to normal just from eating the right foods, from being in the right environment, right people, etc. A long story. So we learned also a lot about Ayurveda, which are the doshas, all of this. But food that is cooked with love, food that is cooked with respect, is all sattvic. Food that is cooked in a rush with not that much respect is rajasic. Food that is created with absolute disregard is called tamasic food. But keep in mind that ahar is not just food. It is anything that you imbibe through your eyes, through your ears. So what he's saying is the same thing applies to TV shows. Same thing applies to books. Same thing applies to anything that is written, that you look, that you listen to, podcasts, etc. So
social media.
Media, right?
Social media, yeah.
Um, how much time? How much time have we used up, Lou?
36 minutes on this.
Okay, all right. Wow. Tamasic food. Last one, verse 10. Those who are tamasic like this kind of food, not cooked properly. In fact, many times here in the United States, we go out to dinner with people in a restaurant, and I don't eat steak, but people that eat steak, they ask for it to be raw completely. He says, look, I don't want it even cooked just a little bit, maybe. So that's very tamasic food, not cooked properly. Food that is kept for a long time in a refrigerator or under covers. You keep modifying the food and say, okay, I'm going to put a different kind of spice in it. It's 5 days old, but I'll eat it. According to the Gita and the Upanishads, if you keep food after cooking it for more than 3 hours, then it's considered stale. So what they recommend, if you want to have sattvic food, you should eat it fresh. It has life in it, it says. Live food is that which is eaten within 3 hours, freshly cooked. So gata rasam means all the essence in the food is gone. The only matter is left. The essence is gone. Food substance is gone. Maybe even the taste is gone. But the smell, puti, durgand, disgusting smell, base smell. Some like that. Some like it. I mean, just the example of wasabi, which I like and which Lou likes, has a smell to it, has a taste, a pungent taste. Sattvic people don't like that. Rotten food, for example, alcohol. Alcohol is rotten. I mean, if you knew how alcohol was made and the taste of it, if you give it to a child, he'd spit it out. He said, this is horrible. What we drink it for, those who drink alcohol, are for the effect on the mind and how you feel, not for the taste. Food that has eaten in the past, left there and eaten again. These are all tamasic food. Eating while walking around, eating while on a buffet, eating at a street vendor is all considered tamasic way of eating. Very quickly, I was at a table with Deepak Chopra many years ago. There were a bunch of other people around, and there were 8 people on the table. My wife, myself, Deepak Chopra, and we were talking. And Deepak Chopra has just given a lecture, and a couple of the women sitting next to him started asking him questions. And for a while, he just stayed silent and eating. And then they pursued in their questions. And he said to them, look, according to our culture, when we eat, we eat. We focus on the food that we're eating. We don't discuss anything. This is not like a martini lunch, he said. Eat your food, focus on your food, let it get digested, sit down, relax, let the food be taken in, imbibed, and then after that we can ask and answer questions. So not eating while on a buffet, standing